What's up, Fiery 49 folks? The microphone is not messed up. I am still working through some laryngitis, some voice strain thanks to Kentucky allergies and the effects of those. So bear with me if you have a lot of coughing or I had to correct my voice, but that's what's up. Here beside me, you see a Mars light. This is the Mars light off the top of Fiery 49. We're behind on some of our videos and catch up, but we're addressing water leaks and some water damage inside of the cab of Fiery 49. The headliner specifically, we found a mouse nest behind the headliner. It's got some mouse urine damage and some water damage from leaks. So we've got our flashing beacons off the top, which may wind up getting replaced with a more original light. And this is our Mars light. We're doing these while the headliner's out because the wiring and the mounting bolts for these are behind the headliner. So it's the perfect time to service all this while it's out. The Mars light, as it was, the headliner had to come out to service the internals. We're going to change the bolt configuration where we can unbolt it, unwire it from the rooftop and leave the headliner in. So in the future, we can service this on a regular basis and keep it in good working order without having to take the headliner out of the truck. But the basics of it, Mars light, these came about in the 30s. They were invented by a Chicago firefighter. You see these a lot on fire apparatus. Even to this day, they still make a reproduction style 888 Mars light, very similar to this that you can still procure new to this day. A lot of people call these a gyro light. They are different. Mars light was a company, Chicago firefighter. The sweep on the Mars light is side to side, think left to right. People often call them gyro lights, but a gyro light, that was by Powell. It's a different company. And they have a side to side sweep with an up and down motion. So if you're seeing the pattern out in front of you, the Mars lights have a left to right motion, whereas gyro lights have almost a figure eight because they have two axes of motion. So anyway, this is an all mechanical light. As you can see probably in the video, and we'll show the reflector inside actually physically moves. It's on hinges top and bottom. There's a motor and a crank pin behind it. The motor spins the wheel. As the connecting rod turns, it turns the crank pin, moves the reflector back and forth, and you get an oscillating pattern that was in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, a pretty standard warning light system. They've gone out of favor for solid state and LEDs, that kind of stuff, but very effective light, easy to maintain, but you do have to get inside here. So we were dog sitting and babysitting last night. I had to sleep over with the kids, and it was a good time to let them do their thing while we sat down at the kitchen counter and turned it into our maintenance shop and got inside. So if you want to see what's inside the Mars light, how it operates, servicing, cleaning up, and just what's in here, then hang tight for a few minutes and we'll run through quickly the inside, how it looked, what we found, cleaning it up, putting it back together, and getting back to operation. It is worth noting, you'll see in the video on the markers, the motor is a 6-volt listed motor, but we've been running it for 4 years at 12 volts, and someone did change the bulb. So it's a 12-volt bulb. The motor's rated at 6 volts, but it's been handling 12 volts just fine. Electric motors that were designed for a long run cycle, not uncommon for them to be able to do that. Probably going to put a resistor in and drop this back to 6 volts because as you can see, the 12-volt bulb and the motor, we're running it at 6 volts right now. When it's running, about 2.5 amps. Starting amperes are about 3 to 3.5. We went through in the video, if you want really detailed stuff, the electronics, we showed it running at 6 and 12 volts. Starting amperage with, without the light. Just the bulb itself draws about an amp at 12 volts with the stuff. So anyway, if you want to get geeky and electronic, we filmed some of that to show how it affected at 12 and 6 volts. Also, we were looking to see if we could drop the amperage draw when it was operating. So by cleaning, lubricating, polishing, we were hoping to drop the current draw somewhat for the light. We did a little bit, not a huge difference. It was working fine. So basically, we dropped the amount of amperage it takes to overcome that thick, heavy grease. But otherwise, the mechanism was in really good shape and wasn't taking more than it should. So we didn't have much to fix. We just cleaned the gunk off. But the reason we're chasing that, we've noticed on a few of our long parades, even though we have an 80 amp alternator, during parades, we're idling the engine a lot. A lot of these we still have a lot of the incandescent filament bulbs. So at idle, with all the emergency lighting going, we actually have had an issue of the overall system voltage dropping down to 10, 11 volts. Pretty easily fixed. You push the clutch in, we can pull the throttle out a little bit and let the alternator spin faster and catch it up. But it's one of those things, if we can drop a little bit, keep the truck at idle, not have to run off idle, no surprises if someone else is driving and pulls the clutch out and the idle's up, they don't get surprised. That's my main thing. Is I'd like to get the truck where some of these parades, we're doing the music from the truck now. I can get in the back and do the DJing instead of driving the truck. But a lot of people just don't know how to drive the manual transmissions anymore. And then you start adding in things like, hey, learn to use the clutch. By the way, also keep the clutch in, pull the throttle cable out, idle the engine up, just trying to make it less complicated so we can do some of the other fun stuff versus just driving the truck all the time. So anyway, that's what we're chasing. But I know it's a long intro, but that's the rundown. So coming up, the inside, what's in this Mars Lite right here. Pretty neat stuff, old technology, but clearly still working and going strong decades later.
Very quickly, this is how we disassembled the Mars Lite. Once it's off the truck, the bezel that goes around the lens, the single screw there, just take that out. The bezel comes off, the lens falls out. That gives you access to the reflector and also to remove the bulb inside. After that, we simply went under the base of the light, took out the 2 bolts that hold the base to the housing mechanism, and that allows the base to come off, and then the cosmetic cover that slides over the mechanism and frame just slides off and gives you access to all the internals for servicing. So once we had all the cosmetic pieces removed off the light and had access to the internals, we hooked it up to our adjustable power supply and just wanted to see how many volts and amps it was drawing to start up to run. The light was working well. As we noted, we were running it at 12 volts. It was designed to run at 6. So we just used our power supply, set 12 volts, brought the amperage up, and we would see when it would start, what the starting voltage was, how it ran, and you can see on the screen at 6 volts running the amp draw and that. So we basically ran through and got our benchmarks of running at 12 volts, running at 6 volts, the amp draw. The amp draw wasn't much different between the two, with both the motor running and the bulb lit at both 6 and 12 volts. Starting voltage or starting amperage was around 3 amps, and the light was running around 2.2 to 2.8 with everything on. You can see here it's running with just the motor right at about just under 2 amps. The light bulb itself draws about another amp, so around 3 amps of draw when the light is operating. Here you can see pictured the condition of the mechanism on the inside once we opened it up. We have no idea the last time this light was serviced on the inside, but you can tell it's gunky, it's dirty. We took this all apart and cleaned it in hopes of just overall improving the operation of the light and trying to reduce the power consumption, lower the amp draw and the strain on the motor. But the light was working pretty well. So basically here, this is just the motor. We've got it free. It's going to start and run on its own without all the drag of the mechanisms. And come to find out, the mechanisms in the light actually weren't putting much draw on the motor at all. It started at about 2.6 amps at a 6 volt setting. As we brought the amps back down, you can see it starts to run here at about 6 volts, 2.8 amps, which is about what it was drawing with the mechanism on. So that means the mechanism itself was not causing any binding. Nothing was in bad shape. We still disassembled and cleaned everything, but the motor drawing about the same with nothing attached as it is with the mechanism intact. So that's good. It means our internals weren't binding, putting undue stress on the motor, but probably not much to be gained with it other than just getting fresh grease and oils in there and cleaning it up and having the peace of mind of knowing we have the light serviced. Well, as it turns out, we actually did get a nice drop in our amp draw after cleaning and lubricating everything. A nice lightweight oil. We serviced the motor. It seemed like the motor itself needed the most work after lubricating the motor itself. We actually went up with a pretty good drop. The mechanism running, motor, no light, running at about 1.5 amps. If you disconnect, you'll see the starting amperage about 3 again, but it is running about half an amp less than what it was before. So we did have a little gain in performance with the cleaning and the new lubricants. And this is our final result. This is 6 volts running with the mechanism clean. and the 12-volt bulb inside. So running it right at about 6 volts and 3 amps with everything back in working order, service clean, ready to go. So we're good to put this back on top of Fiery 49. We're going to run the bulb at 12 volts to have it brighter. We're going to step the motor down to 6 volts as it was designed for, but we're looking at about 6 volts and 3 amps of draw with the serviced Mars light.
Several days later.
Good morning, Fiery 49 folks. Beautiful day here in Kentucky. We're back with Fiery 49 doing a little working. Had a great weekend in Louisville, Kentucky at Thunder over Louisville. Now it's back to fire truck stuff. This is very temporary, but showing you what we've been up to. Our Mars light is back on top of the truck. We've created new gaskets, got it weather sealed in, weather stripped. We've got our mounting plates. We'll get the masking tape down. That was temporary to help get it up, but just want to show the difference. One of the things we're doing and putting the Mars light back on, while we had it off in service, the Mars light, realized the internal motor that moves the mechanism was designed as a 6-volt motor. We've been running it at 12, but it's pretty fast. So what we're going to do, I'll show you it running at 12 volts. So we'll turn it on. We've got it wired directly into 12 volts right now. We're keeping the bulb 12 volts because we put a 12-volt bulb in. So we'll have the light up top, and you can see the rate of movement, how fast that is at 12 volts. But we're going to put this voltage reducer in. This guy right here. They're only a few bucks. This is actually sold and marketed as a voltage reducer for the heater blower motor. Rated at 6 amps. We know after bench testing that our Mars light is only pulling about 3 with both. So this will handle the amp range of our Mars light, get us back at 6 volt and slow it down. We'll get this permanently wired in and tucked away, and then we'll shoot a separate video and show you the difference in the speed between 6 and 12 volts, and that'll put the motor back where it's designed to be at and slow our speed down a little bit to look a little more period correct.
Not much noticeable difference, but here's the difference between 12 and 6 volts on the drive motor installed on the truck.
So we've had a really good day today. If we go wide, we've got half the headliner in now, which means we've got our Mars light back up. Still some work to do. We're waiting on getting the other lights because there's going to eventually be the original style rooftop lights, the dolly pops. Dolly pops? How about lollipops coming in up here? The wiring we'll go back to. So we'll have to do the rest of the headliner later, but looks much better. Got a factory look back to it. And we're in. We have our bezels and our knobs will eventually, you can see our modern radio head unit. I've got the screen off, but it pops in and out. And the goal, or not the goal, but what we'll eventually get to, these mounting studs we use to mount the modern radio, we'll get these trimmed down, cut down, where that fits behind the factory replacement bezels and knobs. They'll stay in place and just look like a factory radio, and our little fake blank factory style radio will fill in the hole where the blanking plate used to be, and they'll at least look period correct, although not functional. And then when we're driving, backing up, need the backup cameras and that kind of stuff, we'll make an insert where this fits in the radio receptacle, and we'll pop the screen back in when needed, and we park it for shows and all that kind of stuff. We'll put our little fake radio cover back on, and we'll have our knobs and stuff in the right areas. We've got our Mars light wired back up. It's now the motor has stepped down to 6 volts. Didn't have much change in the speed as compared to before, but we got a 12-volt bulb receiving 12 volts, so it's nice and bright. But we stepped the motor down back to 6 volts like it was designed for. And also our siren, which was it's been having a little trouble today. It's been sitting, and the brushes and stuff seem to be having fits making contact. But we put our variable resistor in, our trailer brake resistor. It's hiding right back there. You can see we piggybacked, put a jumper wire in off our original, basically just ran our original wire to it through that resistor and up to the switch. And we're much closer back to that original voltage. I didn't measure the voltage, I just adjusted the resistor till it sounded good. And It's adjusted to my ear. You can see lots of wiring back there, factory, non-factory radio stuff hanging. We still have to clean up, but we've got our variable resistor on our Siren. It sounds the way I like now. We don't have that really fast jump straight to top speed and overwinding and all that kind of stuff. Mars light's doing great. Headliner's in, so very productive day. We'll get the rest later. It's a little bit at a time, but things are looking great. And thanks for checking in. We hope to see you at one of our springtime and summer events coming up very soon with Fiery 49.